Are mana rocks a scam? Are they something that we should start cutting? Quit using so much? The idea comes from a Trinket Mage video called Mana Rocks Are a Scam that he posted about 4 months ago. And I've been thinking about it off and on. Listening to it a couple more times to really get his thesis, to really get his idea. And what he proposes is that a lot of people, they blindly will make a deck, and I'm not talking about green decks where you can go get lands. I'm talking about the colors where you don't have the go find land ramp that green has access to. So, for example, blue-black Sig. So, Trinket Mage talked about his Sig deck, therefore I'll talk about mine. In Sig, I only have 2 rocks, not counting Soul Ring, because Soul Ring is so good. It's just not in scope of the discussion. I'm talking about the rocks where they give you less mana than you invest in casting them. Soul Ring obviously gives you more than you invest. And this deck really doesn't require that much mana to function. So I don't feel under pressure to have a lot of rocks. Why do people run rocks? They either run it for speed, because they want to have more sources of mana available to cast their spells, their bigger spells quicker, or they just want to go wide and have more mana available to do more things, not necessarily one big thing, but more things. For example, if I have 6 mana, I can cast Mind Slicer and Sig. If I only have 4 mana, it's either Mind Slicer or Sig, not both. So in turn 4, if I've cast 2 rocks, then I would have the 6 mana. Turn 1, land, turn 2, rock, turn 3, rock, turn 4, I've got 2 rocks and 4 lands, assuming I've hit all my land drops. The other thing is, every mana rock has an opportunity cost. For example, on turn 2, do I want Waste Knot in play, or do I want to cast a mana rock? Well, I'd much rather get Waste Knot so I can start doing what the deck wants to do. This version of Sig is a discard deck. It's not a good deck as far as winning. It's a good deck as far as making everybody else miserable and just enjoying it. Yeah, I've got one of those decks, and Sig is it. It's a discard deck. The goal is to make everybody discard, except me, as much as possible. Make everybody else discard every turn. That's the idea. And for that, if I have too many rocks, then I have less things to make people discard. Like I said, it's an opportunity cost. Now, one thing he didn't talk about the other thing he mentioned is if you've invested a bunch of mana into a bunch of rocks, and those represent significant sources of mana for you, if somebody blows them all up, or somebody cyclonic rifts, then you're set back. If you've been spending your mana to do things your deck wants to do instead, then you're in a much better position. You recover faster. For example, Cyclonic Rift, if everybody picks their stuff up, if I've got a bunch of creatures, like these burglar artifacts, and I pick them up, and when I replay them, everybody's going to discard cards, it's helping me do the deck wants to do, as opposed to the guy who just is rebuilding his mana factory and not really advancing his game plan. Or if all the artifacts are destroyed, well, I lose like an artifact creature. I don't lose that many rocks because I don't have any, but the guy with 5-6 rocks, if all those goes away, it sets him back. It might not set him back absolutely, because he might still be at 6-7 mana depending on his land situation. But mentally it will set him back. Mentally it will knock him off equilibrium, and he will be thinking about all the mana that he had previously that he no longer has. And he'll feel like he has to scramble to catch up. He'll be, depending on his personal psychological profile, he might get bogged down by mourning over what he's lost, not focusing on what he still has. The other thing Trinket Mage didn't mention is the other things the rocks do. They fix my colors. Sig is a black deck with a splash of blue. Pretty big splash, but still a splash of blue. So I have these in here in order to give me access to black or blue, because there's been times when I've just drawn black sources, and I have one blue and I want to cast Venser, Shaper, Civil, and I cannot cast him because I only have one source of blue, or the deck in the early game is giving me my blue sources, not enough black sources, so I can't get Rankle down. I can't get Liliana down because I don't have the second black. So those 2 mana rocks allow me to have another source of the color if I've not drawn the appropriate land. Now I could fix that by having more draw, but I've got pretty tight draw with this deck anyway. Obviously I've got Rhystic Study, Sig himself, Gus Grimoire. It works pretty goddamn good in this deck. I'm not sure if anybody wants me to talk about the combo anymore. If you do, you can... I'll post a link to an old video where I talk about the combo so you can see it. Yeah, this is something new. So maybe I should put more slivers in the deck. So that's why I've got only 2 rocks, not counting Soul Ring. We already talked about that. Why I've only got 2 rocks in Sig is they're as much for a little bit more color fixing than they are for ramp. Now let's look at another deck that doesn't have any mana rocks that I have, and that's Tyvar the Belligerent. So Tyvar is mono elves. He has no artifacts that have an activation cost, no artifacts that do anything. In fact, he has an artifact that does nothing. His ramp comes from elves, mana elves, quite a few of them. Of course, it's also a balancing. Every mana elf, every elf that gives me mana, unless they've got another ability tacked on to them, as with Elvish Archdruid, where he buffs the team and gives me mana, takes away elves that do something. Oh, by the way, this is fucking hilarious. Elvish Hunter. It's a shitty Fallen in Paris card. 1 in green for a 1/1 elf. 1 green tap. Target creature is not untap as normal during its controller's untap step. Next untap step. Had a game with Cube where he had a flyer I couldn't deal with. This deck has a real hard problem with flyers. That's why I've got Hurricane in here. And he had a flyer I couldn't deal with. So he attacked me once, and I locked it down. I'm going to keep locking it down unless you play a bigger flying threat that I have to deal with. Thank you very much. So this deck has no mana rocks. It's green, so it has creature ramp, and there it is, the artifact that does nothing, and land ramp. Not a whole lot of land ramp, more of its creature ramp because it feeds into the elf theme. But I run into the same problem as the guy that has a bunch of mana rocks. If I am getting a lot of my mana from elves, and somebody casts Blasphemous Act, Day of Judgment, Wrath of God, Damnation, anything like that, I'm kind of screwed. Because not only do I lose my ramped mana creatures, I lose my army. So it's a 2-punch to me. And that's why I try to have cards that allow me to recover. Put in some cards that allow me to try to break out of that. For example, Patriarch's Bidding is in this deck. So, do you have any decks where you just blindly have mana rocks and you just shove them in and you haven't really thought about what they're providing for you? You just, okay, it's turn 2, I drop an Arcane Signet. Okay, it's turn 3, I drop a Commander's Sphere. Okay, turn 4, I drop a Thran Dynamo. Okay, so now you have 3 from the Dynamo. Well, know when it untaps. Yeah, 3 from the Dynamo. I was thinking Worn Poundstone for a moment. 3 from the Dynamo, 1 from the Signet, 1 from the Spear. So that's 5, plus what land you have. Okay, so what are you going to cast? Some big single threat? And in that time, how did you advance your game plan? You've created several tempting targets for people to destroy. For example, if I'm playing a deck that has some artifact destruction, this deck is not. This deck is a bad example. It's got almost no artifact destruction. That's really why Hostage Taker is in here, because Hostage Taker can grab an artifact. So if there's an artifact that's a problem, I can deal with it temporarily. But if I look at somebody's board and they've gone Signet, Sphere, Dynamo, I'm thinking, they're probably going to cast something really nasty that I just don't want to deal with right now. So if I blow up the Dynamo, it'll set them back. And they've not advanced their game plan in any other way otherwise, because they've been too busy ramping. It was a distraction. It gave them a false sense of security. And since it's all colorless, except for the Signet, they're probably not going to be able to counter whatever I, or one of the other 2 players, because I play with a lot of careful guys that know the game quite well, meaning it's not just me that'll be thinking, oh, I should probably blow up that Dynamo. It's 2 other guys too. So you get the Dynamo blown up, and then you're set back. Or you could take out some of the mana rocks, only put them in if they're really called for, if your deck is super mana hungry for whatever reason. And focus on cards that advance your game plan. Focus on having cards that actually push what you want to do forward. So it was a good ramble. Not sure if I made my point clear. So fuck it, let's post this and see what happens in the comments.